Welcome to the Camera Dude Podcast, where we focus our lens on business. We will cover the art of business and everything in between. Join your host, Rob Moorman, a seasoned photographer and RV park owner with over 27 years of experience, as he captures insights from industry experts and fellow entrepreneurs. From mastering customer service to igniting creativity, we explore the common threads that weave through successful businesses. Get ready to click, snap, and discover on the Camera Dude Podcast.
Welcome to the Camera Dude Podcast. My name is Rob Moorman, your Camera Dude and host. Hang out with us to discuss all things business and life. Well, I can't believe it, but I think we have a guest here today that's a superpower in the world. And she's laughing, but it's true. She is involved in so many things and has probably the biggest heart out of all the people that I know. We share the same faith and we share the same outlook on life. And I love to see what she does in her life. So welcome, Mary Brandis.
Thank you. It's such a privilege to be here with you today.
I'm so glad that you are. So, Mary, what I like to do is have my guests introduce themselves because usually I mess it up. So let's have you just tell us, start from the beginning. Where were you born? What was your first job? You know, the whole thing.
I was born in St. Pete. I'm one of the originals of this city. And my parents were brought together in just a crazy way. My dad was from the Cayman Islands. My mom had been orphaned in Kentucky, and they both ended up in St. Pete. And I have been married for 52 years, have 3 children, 11 grandchildren, and my first great-grandbaby on the way in June.
I love it. Well, your husband is wonderful. I call him my snorkeling buddy.
Yes, he is. That's his passion in life for sure.
The last time we were down there together, he took us to a great snorkel that was right off of the shore, and it was probably some of the best snorkeling I'd ever done. And I'm a certified diver, but I didn't need a tank for that.
Well, he's always looking for a snorkel buddy, so let me know when you want to book back up with us.
I would love to do that, actually. It would be a blessing to hang out and just talk everything that we have in common. There's so much of it. It's just insane. So tell us a little bit more about your family. You said you have kids, and how many grandchildren?
11 grand.
11. How do you keep track of that?
Oh, it's easy. Just each one has a bit of your heart, and I sometimes have to look at the calendar, remember exactly whose birth date is when, but they're all wonderful, and I'm very blessed.
I think that's a true sign of the blessing that's on your life, just by the family, the activities in the family, and what they do, and so on and so forth. So that's important. Tell us briefly, just from the beginning, what was any kind of work background that you had? Did you end up working for your father? Did you end up on your own in the very beginning?
My first job as a young teen, I worked at my dad's lumber company. I wanted to be working with his bookkeeper, and I thought that the most she did was dust the books off. So I didn't last very long because the first day that I was there, I went in and asked for a raise, and Dad said, "You're fired." So education has been my passion. And so throughout my life, I majored in elementary education. I was the first teacher hired in 1971 when Northside Christian School was being started. And I worked there for several years, teaching elementary until my children were born. I was a stay-at-home mom. And then I led a women's Bible study for a number of years. And from that, the headmaster of Northside asked me if I would consider coming in as elementary principal.
Wonderful.
And so I did that for 7 years. And then my dad asked me to come into the lumber business and work with him. I did that for 10 years.
Wow.
And during that time, my dad, who was from the Cayman Islands, had invested heavily in businesses down there. And one of them was a resort that I was able to run for the family, and a shopping center and grocery store. So I just feel like I've had a lot of hats to wear.
You have, but it sounds like each experience has been kind of a ladder, if you will, to climb. So it's new when you're doing it, but it's a learning experience that you use to do whatever it is you're doing next. Do you agree in that?
I totally do. And I'll give you an example. I was asked to come in as head of Northside Christian a few years ago, and I thanked them profusely. I said, I'm just really honored, but thank you. I have a job I love, working for my dad. My husband works here. My kids are working in the business. I have a very cushy job. I could come in at 10, leave at 2, and take my mom to lunch if I wanted. Not that I did, but I had that freedom. And after the gentlemen who were presenting the offer to me left, my husband was walking down the hall, and I said, "You're just not going to believe what I was just asked to go in as head of Northside." And thinking he would say, "Well, thank you. I'm glad you're not considering it." He just looked at me and said, "Well, don't you think you ought to pray about it?"
Perfect answer, right?
That was the biggest oops I think I've ever made. And as I began to pray, and God just revealed how in my previous work in education, I had all the education components, but I didn't really have the business components that were needed to be the actual head of school. And working for my dad and working under the wonderful business principles that he operated under, and the president of his company that just modeled great leadership as well, I really realized that God's journey had led me through that, from my textbooks to tool belt,
Wow.
to lead me back into education.
That's well put. Textbook to tool belt. I'm going to have to steal that and use that. I appreciate that. Well, I'm glad you did it. And I can't remember where we first met. I don't know if it was at Northside or not, now that I think about it. But I do remember initially just doing some work for you and your family in the resort early on. But we knew each other before that. It wasn't in depth like it is now, but we sure did. So that's awesome. Go ahead, and it's okay to give a plug. So talk about your dad's business and the heartbreaking story of the fact that sadly he's not with us, but at the same token, that business carries on. What is the business and how can people find it? And then we'll talk about it.
Dad came to the U.S. at a young age with $16 in his pocket. He had been a ship's mate on a sailing vessel, and the captain told him one time he didn't think Linton Tibbetts would amount to anything. And my dad took that to heart, and he said, "By golly, if the world has anything to offer, I'm going to get part of it." And so he came, he ended up in St. Petersburg, started building little houses, and he was buying his lumber from a small lumber company. There were 13 lumber companies in St. Pete back in the early 50s.
Didn't know this.
And Cox Lumber was the very smallest one. And he walked in one day, and Mr. Cox was lamenting about the sales taxes and all of the red tape of running a business, and he just wanted out. My dad asked him how much he wanted for it, and he said $3,000, and my dad did not have $3,000, but he borrowed $1,500 from his brother and went in to work with a partner that was already there at the lumber company. And today, I think that's the only one of the companies that were back in the 50s
From
that
the
remains.
beginning. Wow. I love that. So, Mary, I'm very excited to hear about your dad's company and all that's involved in it. But two things. Give us the full name of the company and, tell us how maybe some of my listeners can find it. What is it that you guys sell that they may be in need of?
Well, originally, the lumber company was Cox Lumber Company.
Excellent. I remember them.
And in 2006, we sold to Home Depot. And Dad thought it was a good time to sell. And ironically, we sold at the highest volume of sales we had ever done.
Wow.
And the next month was when the recession hit. And bankers brought my dad a big crystal ball and said only Linton Tibbetts could have sold at the peak of
I love it.
The sale. And a few years later, Home Depot wanted to dispose of their retail or their contractor sales more, which is what we primarily did. And so we went back into business, but we couldn't have the name Cox. So we decided to use my dad's last name, Tibbetts. He was so well known and well respected. And so he passed away in 2011, but my nephew is now the chairman of the board of
Wonderful.
the organization. The president of our company started out as an 18-year-old cleaning out a lumber shed and worked his way up through the company and is doing a fabulous job. And we have multiple locations across the state now. We do lumber sales. We build trusses for roofs, and we have doors and windows, and it's just a fabulous family business.
I love that. So any of the builders that are listening, that would be the place for them to get good quality service, good quality lumber, and of course any trusses that they need, which I'm assuming would be custom made to whatever they're trying to fit. Okay, I love that. And maybe somebody that owns a resort like you did, or like my RV park, because there's tons of wood that's needed there. So that would be a great place. Is there a website?
Tibbitt'sLumber.com.
Simple enough. TIBBE.
TTS.
Okay.
Lumber.
You got it. TIBBETTS lumber. I almost got it wrong. You saved me. It's like my last name. They always had an E to it in Moorman, but it's not. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, because I know there's so much to talk about going on further in this podcast. But I think Tibbetts has been such a iconic business and still continues to be. And in a way, it's your dad's legacy that's still going. He was pushing through so
Absolutely.
fast that it hasn't stopped yet, and that's a wonderful thing.
We just celebrated 15 years as Tibbetts Lumber and 75 years in the lumber business. So
I love that.
Great.
So my 30 years has nothing on that. So I'm just getting started. That's what I have to look forward to. I love his story and always have. And of course, we want the podcast to have him be a big part of it, but we also want it to be about you. But without him, you wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
And you wouldn't be who you are, I think. I met him in the Caymans for the first time when we were there photographing for you. And here's this man who, which we'll talk about in a minute, started humbly, like you said, and made this giant success in companies everywhere and had done well financially, but also not just financially, in the community, giving back and all the things that he had done. Takes me and throws me in the back of this old pickup truck that's about to fall apart and drives us to the place he was born at. And the whole story was wonderful because I could see who he is aside from all of that, because that was his home, if you will, his place to live. And so you could see the real Mr. T, as we called him, and just, I don't know, I cherish that moment. I remember standing in the back of the truck, looking over the top going, I wonder if I'm going to die right now. And he's going over all these rough roads. And
he loved nothing more than to take people and tour them on his island.
I love it.
I think so many people have been touched by his story of coming to the States with so little, but having such a vision and principled values that he built his company on. And I can remember just so many of the sayings that my dad had, like, when a customer walks through the door, you treat them like a prince. Your door is always open. I don't care if it's a truck driver or a bank president. You treat them both the same, and they're always welcome in your office. You buy right. You watch your credit. I mean, there were just so many things that is Daddy taught us and lived out.
Knowledgeable information. We could close the podcast at this point. That was so rich. We had that happen just recently. We had Mike Harding on, who owns the Three Daughters Brewing in St. Petersburg.
Yes.
And he said very similar things. The door is always open. Say thank you to your clients twice. And it sounds like your dad was very similar to that in the way he did that. I'm finding, having two businesses that are in two different worlds, that's the biggest thing that's missing right now, is the understanding of how deep customer service is. And the customer's always right, maybe when they're not even. But if they perceive it that way, you have to solve it as if it actually happened. Or maybe it did actually happen. But, it's either way. And it sounds like your dad was on top of that. And I did a photo shoot for you, guy, for the company. And I think it was a holiday party, Christmas party. And I just remember all the folks that went up to the microphone to speak had nothing but good things to say about the company, about your dad, about your family, and how much the employees loved working there and how long most of the employees had been there, which is a true sign of a healthy business for sure. So that's interesting. Are you still involved in the Caymans?
I am. More just as I have a home down there and love going down. I love using my home for ministry and offering it to people to come down, and I say it's where I go to restore my soul. There's just nothing like looking out on the water and the seas and the ocean waves coming in and the palm tree swaying. It just is such a great space.
I love it. I loved being there. And by the way, I appreciate the opportunity of you having us, when you owned the resort at the time, come down and take all those photos. And I couldn't stop working because I was just excited about being there. I think I ran everybody into the ground because we worked late.
Well, you all did a beautiful job, so I was very grateful.
Good. We loved it. I appreciate that. Moorman Photo is still going. By the way, I'm excited to say that we are in our 30th year of business this year.
Wow.
Which is impossible for me to believe because I still feel like I'm climbing that ladder. When you're chasing business and all the clients and all the things that go with it, it's just that way. So it's important. Let's talk about that a minute, since you were running and overseeing the resort, and it was the Little Cayman Beach Reef.
It was Brack Reef Beach Resort.
Excuse me.
The name has now been changed to Cayman Brack Resort.
Okay.
So
is it still in the family?
It is still in the family.
Okay, good for you.
And they've done a beautiful job of updating and keeping it just really a premier spot for both divers and tourists alike.
Are the latest hurricanes an issue for them? I know you've had in the past. But...
We have. In 2009, we were really devastated and had to rebuild. But the last few ones, I either get a beach or I lose a beach. It just depends on the way the waves are going.
I guess if that's the only concern, which, I mean, it's still expensive, but not as much as the whole thing being wiped out. My RV park, Sunburst RV Resort, is in what I call Hurricane Alley. It's near Pensacola, an hour northeast of Pensacola. And I don't know why, but God seems to throw hurricanes that way quite a bit. And luckily, we are probably 35 miles inland from the beach. It's a country park surrounded by farms and just kind of nestled in the trees. But it's still enough to create damage. And so every time one heads that direction, I'm on the phone with the insurance guy. Are we good? Is everything signed properly? What do we have? So it's kind of neat to hear that. Well, that's awesome. So your dad is a business master. You learned a lot from that. So let's talk about the resort, longevity and clientele. It's always nice to have happy repeat customers. And I think we've talked about it a little bit because your dad did the same thing at his lumber company. But what would you do as a business owner to keep clients coming back time in and time out, year in and year out?
I think a lot of it has to do with your staffing, having staff that gets to know the guests as they come in, who remembers them when they come back, having a property that is clean and well appointed. Nobody wants to sit out on a dirty beach, so
right,
and that's a constant cleanup. But I think having good food, and we had a great chef, and
yes,
it's an island getaway, so there's not really too much more that you have to provide other than,
It was an oasis in the middle of nowhere, basically.
Yeah.
Or it still is, not was. And I remember photographing the food and meeting the chef. I have a picture I still use in my portfolio. I can't think of his name now. Oh, gosh, he was a wonderful chef, and we set him up on the beach with all the food out on a table, and he's standing behind it. He was the most joyous man to work
Chef
with.
Gregory.
Yes, that's right. Yes. He was so fun. And then a couple of times I went back and photographed, but I think it was on Little, maybe?
Yes.
And they did the Return to Bloody Bay Wall event there, and so they hired me to photograph a movie team that was videotaping somebody photographing the wall. So it was kind of a downline, but that was a great experience because I'm also a diver, and so I got excited about that one, so that was really cool. So let's talk about something a little bit more, unless you have something else to share about service at the resort that you have. The biggest thing I saw, by the way, when I was there is it was always spotless, always clean, and everyone was happy, and they didn't have to think about anything because it was mostly all-inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
There was nowhere else to go anyway, except a tour around the island. So that's interesting. Perfect. Well, tell me a couple of other things. Talk to me about your faith and how that plays a role in your running a business. And I'll share mine as well as to what we think that we need to do, because really, as much as I love my customers, I work for God. And if I can please him, I know that my customers will be happy. And if I do make a mistake, I'm going to turn around and do the same thing to try to please him. So tell me a little bit for you of how that kind of plays out.
I have been a Christian since I was 8 years old.
It was only a few years ago.
Yeah, I wish. But I've grown up in a Christian home, and so I felt in some ways I was in a little bit of a bubble. I had to really make my faith my own, and that came more when I went away to college. And even though I was at a Christian college, there's all kinds of ways that you make decisions, and I just learned that if I was going to be the person that God wanted me to be, I needed to really make my faith my own. And I heard several years ago, this is not original with me, but it has been kind of the guiding force of my life. There's only two things worth investing your life in, and that's Jesus and people. And if you invest in the Lord, in the Bible, which is truth, because those are the only two things that are eternal.
Right.
And so if I want my life to make a difference and believe that God has a purpose for my life, then I want to be known for loving him and loving people.
That's awesome. And I can tell you that one of the reasons why I have you here is because I believe you're someone that does exactly what you just said, so that you know. And I see that in your life, in the things that you do, and how you contend with people and what you do with the resources you've been given to help others and to be in their life. It's fascinating. Helping others doesn't always have to come from financial. There's putting an arm around somebody, hugging somebody when they need it, being there for them. God never says that we won't go through trials, but he does say he'll hold our hand through it. And sometimes it's from one of us that are following him, and that's the biggest. I did 21 years of prison ministry as a volunteer, of course, not as a resident there, and at Polk County Prison, and ended up on a board, and I don't know, all this stuff that really didn't mean a lot. It was all about going in and being there for those guys that were really in need. And when they heard that there was a love, it's so misunderstood today with all that's going on in the world. They understood that there's a love that's unconditional and it's there for them no matter who they are. It's in depth. And what they did, a lot of guys would tell me, well, I'm not worthy, he's not going to love me. And it's, well, let me show you this piece in the Word here. Ephesians 2:8 is one of my favorite scriptures.
Exactly. I don't know if you know about my work with prison ministry.
No, please share.
Several years ago, I had the opportunity to meet Burl Cain. Burl was the renowned warden at Angola Prison in Louisiana, which had been the bloodiest prison in America for over 100 years. It was a place nobody wanted to go. And Burl went in as a young warden, spent 25 years of his life there, and turned the prison totally around. And he did it by bringing in Bible studies and prison seminary programs. And so prisoners could go through a 4-year seminary program and come out with degrees in biblical studies, leadership, counseling, pastoral ministries. And I began to follow Burl in his vision for wanting to replicate what he did at Angola at other prisons around the country. And so he started a prison ministry that has done just that. And I've been involved with that for a number of years. And I'm currently involved with a film program that is going to be doing a film about Angola and Burl Cain. And I'm very excited.
I'm so excited to hear more about that.
Because I think that my heart is that, first of all, prisons in Florida totally need restructuring.
Yes, I agree.
And help. There's not been a new prison built in Florida in over 50 years. And people would be, I think, appalled to know how many of them are not air conditioned, and that the living conditions that some of these prisoners are in is really abhorrent. So I'm very excited to be a part of the prison seminaries program and seeing that kind of go across the country.
I would say that there's two things I want to talk about. One, in a minute, you and I know someone that you know very well who has a great agenda, and we're going to talk about that. My numbers that I'm about to give are a little bit older. I did 21 years in this ministry called Kairos, Kairos, Prison Ministries. And it was an interdenominational ministry, all Christian, but those that came from different denominational backgrounds would come together and actually agree that whatever the things were that would divide us, some people believe you're baptized this way and you do that way or whatever, we would set all that aside except the main thing, and that was, of course, how to get to heaven and through Christ and how it happens and all of that. And I found miraculous changes going on. The numbers back then, the recidivism rate was about 83%. I don't know what it is today. I should
probably
look it up.
Still pretty close to that.
It's got to be. If they were to go through the Kairos prison ministry, it dropped from 83 to 30. And amazingly, if the guys stayed involved, and they also do it in women's prisons as well. So if the inmates were to get involved, it dropped to 12%. And when they got out, they stayed out and they had a whole new life. And I'm going to start crying just talking about it. There's a gentleman who could probably hear this at some point, so I won't mention names, but every day he sends me a text on my phone. When he got out, he ended up at our church by chance. And myself and about 8 other guys that I had drugged in to do this with get this text from him, and this has been going on probably 10 years. And I was like, I didn't go there for that. I went there to serve Christ. And he goes, you don't understand what you've done. And I said, well, I didn't do anything. The Lord did it, but glad to be a vessel.
This is Ryan, co-owner of St. Pete Coffee. One thing we know is fresh coffee just tastes better. That's why we roast single-origin coffee beans every week right here in St. Petersburg, Florida. St. Pete Coffee isn't just about roasting the coffee, it's about creating a coffee experience. You'll get fresh, smooth coffee with every cup, free of that smoky, burned bitterness you find in so many others. So whether you're a fan of a medium or dark roast, you'll be amazed by the clean, pure flavor we bring to every cup. Right now, we're offering a 10% discount to Camera Dude podcast listeners with the discount code CameraDude. Experience the difference.
So let's talk about, you have kids, obviously, but we're going to talk about Jeff and his thoughts that, just slightly, because it's a good segue for that, because he has a big, I don't like the word agenda anymore because it's used inappropriately, but he has a thought process on trying to help out the prison system. What, can you share anything on that? Do you know?
When Jeff served for 12 years in the Florida legislature, and one of his big passions was prison reform. It's not one of those things that people want to put a lot of money into, in the legislative arena. It's not one of those, well, it just makes everybody feel good and happy.
Right.
But if you have a loved one in the prison system, it makes a big difference.
It does.
And I think as Jeff toured, I think he's been to every prison in the state, both male and female. I think he's really been heartbroken at some of the conditions. And he has now started the Florida Policy Project, which looks at best practices across the nation to see the effects of what other states are doing that has brought improvements to their prison systems. And so he's writing policies then to present to the legislation that will hopefully, but it's going to take a monumental move, I think, to move the pendulum to where they will invest in the prison system and be able to have prison guards that are well paid who want to stay on the job, and there's not the heavy turnover that there is. And like you said, the recidivism. That one of the things that Jeff did, which I thought was wonderful, was to help establish some laws that would say that prisoners should be put in a prison closest to their home so that the families can have better access. It's hard if you live in Miami and you've got a loved one in Pensacola. And so he's worked hard on that.
The hardest thing I would see, the prison ministry team, it would be 40 volunteers. There's about 9 pastors and then all of us lay people, if you will, going in to serve. And on a Thursday evening, the weekend starts and ends on Sunday. and we would sleep on the floor at a church nearby, and it was true missionary work. Except for me, I took my little camper and stayed in it because all those old guys that snored a lot was too much for me. I stayed in my little pod out in the parking lot. But having said that, to see the families lined up car after car after car on a Saturday and a Sunday to see their families, and they've traveled for miles to get in, and it was heartbreaking. What I found, in my opinion, was there's lots of, and I'm not knocking anybody or anything, I want to make that clear, there was a lot of government programs where, okay, they got educated, but they didn't change the heart. But the statistics prove that the Christian ministries that come in and people that get to know Christ as their own personal Savior have true heartfelt change. It's written statistics, so it's not just something that's thrown out. The numbers are there. And so, sure, you can educate someone, but if you don't change their heart, it's still the same struggle that they have within them to get somewhere. And if the prison is in horrible shape, I don't think I would behave very well either, And so
Sure.
Can we focus more on rehabilitation rather than having a holding tank? Does that, and psychological assistance, and obviously
And
all the things we
education
mentioned. Education, yeah.
Critical. I'll tell you one quick story.
Please.
When I was helping a prison in East Tennessee partner with Carson Newman University, which was where I went to school, and they had a strong Bible department. And the director of the program, who was at the prison, was telling me recently that he has a prisoner that wants to go through the seminary program, and he was up for probation. And he went to the probation board and he said, I'm going to ask you to defer my probation for 2 years. He said, I need to finish this program because if I do, I will come back a better husband, father, and citizen
Love it.
than if I leave right now.
I love that. And that's a segue, but important as well, is for every person, people will come to me, why do you do prison ministry? I had someone that had an uncle that was severely injured by a person who's now in prison. Why would you help people like that? And so on. But whenever there's someone that leaves a home and goes into a prison, if it's a dad, there's a mom outside trying to feed 3 kids, work 4 jobs, trying to get the kids to school and raise them, barely making ends meet. Parents have to step in. But if someone is rehabilitated spiritually and they come back out and can fill the void in their family that, okay, they got lost. We all have, it's not, so there's never a blame game there. But once they get things straight and right with the Lord and with themselves and understand that they have value in this world, you're putting back a family.
Exactly.
And you're helping it that way. And there's nothing more important than that. I still see the faces of those children waiting to get in to see their family members as we were coming in as a group to do our ministry in the chapel. Well, we just had a prison ministry podcast, and it wasn't about that, but I'm really glad that it went that way. And I didn't know you had done that. So that'll be awesome. Maybe in the links, I'll put a connection if there is something where people
Perfect.
can go and see where you went for that. So tell us a little more about Carson Newman, because I did a tiny bit with my crazy schedule. I didn't have much time, but I scanned you on Google and looked around. And so you have an honor from Carson Newman. It was relatively recent from what I could see. So tell us about that.
I received my doctorate from Carson Newman just a few years ago. And it's one of those pinch me things that you think could never really happen. But I've just been so deeply affected by my time at Carson Newman, through the friendships, through the education, through the, like I said, finding my own faith there, that I've just always stayed very connected with it. And to the point where at Northside Christian School, where I served as head of school, I offer a scholarship to any senior who wants to go to Carson Newman, because I believe that it's just such a great school, and I think everybody should go there.
That's awesome. Well, sign me up then. It's time for a new career change. I got 30 years in, so we'll do that. Let's see. What else do we have here? All right. We have a big endeavor to talk about that you're up against, and I'm excited. You recently invited myself and my wife, Tina, to your home, and we sat and listened to, first of all, a wonderful musician. What is his name? Let's put him out there.
Joseph Habedank.
That's right, Habedank. Thank you. I didn't want to mess up his last name, but what a wonderful worship leader and singer. And if you ask me, just by being in the room with him, you can tell that he's on his way. He's definitely on his way.
He's won 3 Grammys.
He's already there then. Yeah.
So he's just a really... I need to backtrack. I'm not sure it's Grammys, but I know he's won Dove Awards, 3 Dove Awards.
Okay, well, Dove Awards is still a big
that's
thing.
That's it for the Christian world. And he just has a love for the Lord and a love for people, and is just a really gifted musician.
It's an incredible voice, absolutely incredible voice. I was honored to sit there in your beautiful living room and have him sing. I thought, can I be here all day, please? I didn't want to leave, so that was important. Well, your latest endeavor is with the Gospel Music Association, GMA, and of course their Awards Foundation. So tell us about your position in that. As you know, I'm a music lover, a wannabe musician. I have a drum set at home. I don't tell anybody about it, but I do have one, and occasionally I get to play hand drums at church. And it's usually when the good drummer isn't there, they're stuck with me. But either way, I'm glad to do that, and I'm actually glad to serve God in a musical way. I'm just always honored to be able to do that. So it's important. But tell us about your endeavors there and what your position is now.
A few years ago, I was invited to come on the board of the Gospel Music Association. They were looking for someone who had a business background and an education background. And though I was shocked that I was selected to go on it, I felt that when I thought about it, I've probably been as changed, challenged, convicted by a song as I have a sermon. And so even though I'm not really terribly musical, I love music. And so I served on the trade organization board for several years, and then 2 years ago moved over to the foundation board. And that's been a great opportunity for us to further the vision of the Gospel Music Association. And one of the ways that we're doing that...
Yes, please. I was going to ask, so go ahead.
...is by opening a center for Christian and gospel music and a museum right in the heart of downtown Nashville.
Yay.
It's right outside the back doors of the Ryman Auditorium. It's a fabulous location. It's a place where people can come and find out about all the different genres within Christian and gospel music, where they can see the Hall of Fame, where they can have interactive opportunities with music, where they can record their own singing. And
I love it.
It's going to be a place where they will also be able to have young musicians playing on the streets, and just, I hope, bringing a lot of people to come to hear their music and again, hear the message in it.
That's awesome. And so they'll be doing, as they call it, kind of busking in a way, right?
Yes.
And so it'll be somewhere around the museum. What other museums are near there? Do you know? Isn't there another music museum right there, other than the Ryman, which is kind of a museum in itself?
Well, I think the Johnny Cash Museum might be near there. I know that the Museum of the African American Museum is quite nearby. It's in the heart of the music centers.
I love it. Well, I did a little job, and then we'll go back to that, in Nashville. Another good friend of mine, she reminds me of you quite a bit, and had hired me to come out. This person, she'll be on my podcast. She's actually scheduled. If I can get her to sit in one place, she's traveling all over all the time. But she hired me and made a book. She had made her own book called Sticks and Skins, and it was about drummers from all over the world. This wonderful young lady had started the book, got ill, and passed away. And my client picked up the mantle and traveled the world, literally, and photographed these drummers, from high-end famous people to one guy was an inmate that played in a prison, and all this. It's a 500-page coffee table book highlighting drummers. And so I got to go there and be her PR photographer and ride around in the tour bus with famous drummers. So, of course, I didn't tell a soul that I had a drum set at home, but I was phenomenal to listen. I sat in front of a drummer that played for Michael Jackson. I had my feet on his bass drum as I'm shooting through his cymbals, because it was at a cymbal summit that they were presenting this book. And so it blew my hat off, actually. There was so much air coming out of those drums. Thank God for earplugs. But he was phenomenal. And all the other drummers I got to ride around with One of them was on this show, Rich Redman. He plays for Jason Aldean, lives in Nashville. And so I'll probably try to, if he's not on the road, try to visit him when I go for the grand opening and all of that. So we're going to make sure that that happens. Tell us a little bit more. I know that it's not built yet, so everybody's getting excited. How we record here at the Camera Dude podcast is I'm so busy as a photographer, we record a lot of things at the first of the year and then monthly drop them and just have them prepared already. So I don't know where you fall in the queue yet. I'll let you know. But how long until this is open and there's a grand opening?
The grand opening is scheduled for Labor Day weekend in September. So the building was there. We've been able to renovate a good portion of it. And so the process is just ongoing and should be done in a few months.
I'm excited.
It's very exciting.
Well, I'm here for you. Even if it's not a budget concern, anything that you're involved in, I would show up if they needed interior photos for marketing. There's plenty of photographers in Nashville. I wouldn't want to step on any toes, but if you needed that assistance.
Thank you. I'll let them know.
Yeah, we're always there. And maybe a grand opening event portion or whatever is needed. I love music, as you know, and I get kind of giddy when it comes to music just because my father was a phenomenal bluegrass musician. And he had backed up many musicians that go back to the days of Jerry Reed and people like that at that time where he would play in the studio with him. And I used to love to sit and listen to him play. That was the highlights of my dad.
Well, you need to be my guest at the Dove Awards this coming October.
That would be a blessing.
It is going to be at Bridgestone Arena this year. So they're going to have a lot of seats available, and it's going to be an amazing, amazing event. So
I would definitely
let's plan
do
it.
that. And for my wonderful listeners who I love dearly, is that something they can go online and purchase tickets for, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Gospelmusic.org or type in Dove Awards, and it should take you to it.
I love it. All right. It's going to be a fun event. I know it's going to be. And it's a bigger event than maybe the secular music world would realize. But in a way, it runs together because I see musicians backing up musicians no matter what genre they're in to see. I'm a little bit noisy. I grew up an old rock and roller. So my favorite Christian band is a bunch of guys that are now my age. And they're a rock band called Stryper, and I can't help it. I fell in love with them in the 80s, and I still listen to them. But they love the Lord, and that's really what it's about, is that genre draws people that maybe wouldn't hear that type of music in the first place in to hear them. And they're so skilled and so talented that they could play with anybody and anything. Yes. They've managed to position their band to play with all kinds of rock bands that maybe aren't even in their genre, but they're getting on that stage, being able to play skillfully and do what they do. It's really wonderful. Well, I'm glad we did that. Before we get into our closing questions, this is the fun part, so we can be loose and relax and have a good time. But before we do that, tell my listeners, give them a little nugget, anything you want about life or living, anything fun, not to put you on the spot, but just leave them with something special or maybe a favorite saying of yours.
Oh, gosh, I have a lot of favorite sayings, but most of them were from my dad.
Well, those are good too.
Well, Vicks will cure anything but a bald head and a broken heart.
I love it.
One of them once he used to pound into us.
It didn't work for me. So,
I don't know. I think for my life, one of the great joys that I have is a love for travel and a love for hospitality. And so I love it when I can have people over into my home. A few years ago, I started what I called Miss Polly's parties for my mom to have something to look forward to. And we started with about 6 ladies having tea. And Mother passed away a few years ago, and I couldn't give the ladies up. So monthly, I try and have up to, 45 ladies now that come, and we do something different every single time.
I love it.
Done about 89 parties over the years. So I love to do that, and I love to travel. I could keep my bags packed year-round.
Very good. And travel is, it's life-changing. It just is to see how others live in the other part of the world. I was going to wrap it up, but you said Polly. How is Polly, your daughter, and what are they up to?
My daughter Polly is living in Atlanta, and her oldest daughter is my granddaughter who's expecting, and her next daughter graduates this year. And
how is that possible?
I know. And Reese is an amazingly gifted singer, dancer, actress. And so she's exploring colleges for musical theater right now.
Wonderful. That's so exciting.
Very blessed.
That is a blessing. I think, if I remember right, the photo shoot for you at the resort was a while back. Polly's kids were babies? They were little, if I remember right. I can't remember the year now. But yeah, so anyhow, I'm not that old.
It was a ways. It was a ways back.
We're not that old, are we? I don't know. What's age, right? It's just a thing. Well, let's get into our questions here, guys. I borrowed these questions from James Lipton, who borrowed them from Bernard Pivot. And at the end of his interviews for the Inside the Actors Studio session, he would throw these out at people. I took one out because he would always ask them what their favorite cuss word is. And I thought I better take that out so I don't have to put explicit on my... Although I do find it funny because even though we're believers, none of us are perfect. If I hit my thumb with a hammer, I'll probably say something I shouldn't and then have to apologize. But nonetheless, what is your favorite word?
I think one of my favorite words is humor.
Nice.
I love to laugh. I don't mind making other people laugh, sometimes at my own expense. But I think humor is a very underutilized gift that God's given us.
I love that. I at one point wanted to be a comedian and just recently was speaking to someone about it. And I realized that just the burdens of life and running two businesses and whatever life brings, I'm not as funny as I used to be. And so I've made it a goal in 2025 to be a little funnier and also let that play out. So hopefully by the end of the year, these podcasts will be hilarious by the time we get there. That's the plan. What's your least favorite word?
Arguments.
Arguments. I love that.
I can honestly say I never heard my parents argue. And what a wonderful example that is for your children.
That is a godly example. And not everybody can say that, where there's been struggles in the home, which sometimes struggles make us stronger, but boy, you sure got to go through it.
And it doesn't mean that you don't stand up for your principles and you don't articulate things that need to be said, but you just don't carry on an argument.
It's not worth it. Well, it's biblical. It talks about it. It's kind of a moot point because you're not going to get anywhere. So just don't, right? All right. So in life, what turns you on?
I guess going from that laughter, travel, getting to plug into a new place and see things. I love to start planning trips and
I love it. So what's your next trip in brief?
Going to Turks and Caicos next month. My nephew, who is running the resorts that we have in the Caymans, is opening a new Marriott resort in South Caicos.
Awesome.
Called Salterra, and it's going to be fabulous.
Very
so we're
good.
going to see that.
And it's open and ready to go.
It
so
is.
my listeners can look them up and head out that way. Any resort that you're involved in or your family, I always highly recommend to our listeners to head out there. So don't even miss out on this one.
I think there's flocks of flamingos that walk the beach. It just sounds amazing.
I'm on my way.
Amazing.
Let's go now. All right. So what sound or noise do you dislike?
Oh, my goodness. That's a difficult one. I should have thought through that.
It could be simple.
I
had one person that said, I can't stand leaf blowers.
Oh,
Simple as that. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what I can't stand other than crying. I don't like crying.
Yeah, me either. I mean, if it's an infant, it's understandable. But when people are sad, as believers, we have a tendency to take on other people's burdens, which is a positive thing.
And you want to fix whatever is hurting.
I do. You want to fix it for them. And sometimes God and time is what it takes. Even though I want to go in and put a Band-Aid on it right away, it's just not possible. What profession, other than the ones you've had, would you like to have attempted?
Might have liked to have been an interior designer.
Huh. You would be good at that because I saw the lobby at your resort. It was gorgeous. And you picked all of that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. But that's probably a secret.
Not anymore.
Dream.
Oh, okay. Dream. I love it. Well, I think that interior decorating is wonderful because when you have a happy space, you have a tendency to relax when you're in there. And I just find that, and your resort was very relaxing, by the way. And when we went to photograph it, you would walk me through to show me what you had designed. And I'm thinking, wow, how do you know all this? But you sure did it. It was wonderful. What profession would you not like to do?
Would not like to be a veterinarian.
Yeah, I couldn't do that.
Don't do reptiles at all. I'm not sure many other animals.
And your dad came from an island full of big iguanas.
Yes, but they're harmless. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. Probably, though, thinking about another vocation, I would love to have been a Southern gospel pianist, or I could just bang out the piano and just make such incredible music.
I love that. Yeah, music would be for me as well. So, and I could see you doing that. And you're not done yet. Get that piano tuned up.
Fingers
and let's
don't
go.
work like they used to, but
yeah, mine either. I know that. Well, that is it for us, guys. We're so honored and blessed for you listeners. We're grateful. Before I close, I want to tell you that my wife, Tina, and I just spent 5 days at the Imaging USA conference in Dallas, Texas. So if you're a professional photographer and part of our tribe, I highly recommend heading out to Imaging USA in 2026 when it happens. People say it's expensive to go, but I have to tell you, if you're in business as a photographer, you can't afford not to be there. The things we learned this year are incredible. The relationships we made are incredible. Special thanks to Mary Brandis for being here, my good friend, and what a big heart that she has. So guys, thank you for hanging out with us on the Camera Dude podcast. Remember, always reach out to those that have paved the way ahead of you for success. They are a great resource. Until the next one, stay safe, be peaceful, and always look up for your directions in life.
Thanks for tuning in to the Camera Dude Podcast. Don't forget to visit us at cameradudepodcast.com for more episodes and exclusive content. Connect with Rob Moorman on moormanphoto.com to explore his professional photography. And when you're ready to hit the road, make memories at sunburstrvresort.com. Until next time, keep capturing moments and chasing dreams. See you on the next episode of the Camera Dude Podcast.